It's been a little while as we skipped a month, but we now have the April release of GameMaker version 2023.4. Structs got even better with some very cool new functions, including struct for each. This lets you run a custom function on each member of a struct. This is awesome as iterating over a struct is often quite painful, and even now still something that would make you consider an array versus a struct where iteration is always much simpler and more efficient. But now when you do need to iterate on a struct, we have a far easier way to do it. This is making me rewrite a chunk of the JRPG code just to be easier to teach and understand by itself. Variable clone. Finally, we're able to directly copy an existing struct and all of its contents without having to manually write those contents to a new struct or use a constructor. Very, very useful. And some struct hash functions which provide a slightly more efficient, as I understand it, way to find struct members from arbitrary strings. The build menu now has a rerun button. It's not actually explained, but it seems this allows us to rerun the last build of the project without recompiling, which might save a lot of time if you just want to test stuff from a clean launch of the game, etc. There's also new separate clean options for audio, graphics, and code for if you run into caching issues with one of those specific areas of your game. A new preference exists under General and Paths that lets you automatically clean temporary files before each build. I highly recommend this personally to save on disk space. Previously, my own temp folder would repeatedly get rammed full of GameMaker builds. There's a new event for when the playback of any sound finishes. This event will carry a struct containing the sound ID, asset ID, and was stopped, which tells us if the sound was stopped by code or channel limitations, or if it simply came to its natural end. The particle system has been improved on the back of the new visual particle editor with the addition of particle get info. This allows us to read the particle types and emitters from visually created systems, which we had no way to access previously. Very important for adding more emitters, copying particle settings, and so on. A very, very welcome improvement that brings the visual editor much closer to a total replacement for manually set up systems. Template strings once again reworks how we can write strings in GameMaker. We very recently got the ability to include variables in the string function using curly braces and numbers, then listing those variables. Now, however, we can use the $ symbol to create strings with those variables directly in the string. And not just variables, the text in between the curly brackets here is run as regular GML code, so any expression will work here as well. Array shift is a helpful new array function similar to array pop. It deletes and returns the first entry of an array and then shifts the rest of the array left one position to fill the gap. Very useful if you created any kind of first in, first out queue of data to be processed using an array. Fill an array from 0 to 10, then process it from 0 to 10, deleting the entries as you go. There's a bunch of new filters that are uncharacteristically quite helpful this time. Glow will be very useful for highlighting objects, perhaps as you hover over them with a mouse or get close to them. Recursive blur is just always quite useful for lots of things. Clouds, this one's less useful. Blend and blend addEXT let you apply blend modes to a layer in a much simpler way. All kinds of things are possible with this. Check the manual on blend modes in general for more information, but suffice to say this gives a lot of different options for having layers mask one another or blend in many different ways. Very cool stuff. Speaking of masking, there is also a mask effect that lets you specify a texture that masks the layer, seemingly constrained to your current view of it. Unsure, but pretty cool either way. Sprite addEXT now lets you load sprites from external files or URLs too asynchronously. You've always been able to add new sprites at runtime like this, but usually it would freeze the game briefly and usually requiring it to be done at some sort of loading screen or other dedicated time. Now you can do it asynchronously so it won't affect your game. When the sprite is finished loading in the background, an async image loaded event will trigger so you can confirm and begin using the loaded sprite. Window set show border is also now a thing. And last but not least, we have some new debug macros, allowing us to see the current code line, current file/scope, and the name of the current innermost function. Overall, a pretty big update, which certainly helps make up for the quiet period in between. Lots of cool new helpful stuff and plenty of things I did not have time to mention, so do check the release notes for the full details as always. Thanks for watching, hope this was helpful. Thank you to my patrons for funding what I do, and I'll catch you all next time.